Hello and welcome to Unleashed, the show that explores how to thrive as an independent professional. I'm your host, Will Bachman, and I'm here today with Jen Rudd, who runs Grow with Jen. She is an Airtable developer and going to teach me about Airtable today. Jen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Will. I really appreciate being here.
All right, well, and if you listeners are listening, you may want to watch the video version of this because Jen is going to be sharing her screen and it's going to be a highly visual episode. So Jen, why don't you go ahead and share your screen and let's get into this. Maybe just start by giving me a bit of an orientation to what exactly is Airtable. Is it a spreadsheet tool? Is it a database? Like, how would you explain to people what even Airtable is?
Absolutely. So Airtable is a database. It's a cloud-based database, meaning that you can access it anywhere that you have an internet connection, which some people think is a downside if you don't have internet for whatever reason. But it is great because as businesses have more distributed teams, meaning that you could be anywhere in the world and run your business and have multiple team members in different locations, it's a great way to have all of your data in one place where everyone can access it at their own speed on their own time and able to collaborate within the base, within the workspace. So it's a great tool to keep all of your data. As you get as your business grows and as you start to do more processing, or you just are trying to find more ways to keep control of your business and scale, data is going to be very, very important. So having all of your data in one place is really important. And then also being able to action off of that data. So that's what Airtable does. It's kind of a database, but it's also an automation tool. It's a visualization tool. It does some really cool stuff. And it's the great thing about Airtable is it's a completely empty box that you can do whatever you want with it. So it's just really figuring out what the problem in your business is and then finding a solution using the tool.
Okay, great. So often the best way to learn something is by walking through an example, and I know you've prepared one for us. So walk us through it.
Absolutely. So my demo is a placement agency. I work with a lot of placement agencies, domestic staffing mostly recruitment. Some are staffing, meaning that some just place clients long term with talent, and sometimes they need to fill temporary positions. So there's a little bit of recruiting and there's a little bit of staffing. But no matter what you're doing as a placement agency, you do have to kind of control two different customers. You have the clients that are paying you and the talent that you are trying to acquire to match with your clients. So it's important to understand that you have to, make the experience really nice for both customers that you have, because if you don't treat your talent well, they won't be part of your agency and your clients won't get what they need. And if you don't treat your clients well, then they won't pay you. So it's kind of important to keep, both sides of the coin, both sides of your business happy. And so a lot of software that's out there, a lot of CRMs kind of focus only on one customer, but having those two customers and exploring the relationship between the two of them is what's really nice about Airtable, because you have this database aspect, but it's also relational, meaning that you can explore those relationships and make sure that you're kind of fostering both sides of your business model at the same time.
Okay.
So basically I have here a nanny agency, basically. So I have a caregiver applicants tab, which is where I keep all track of all the talent, all the people that I'm trying to recruit to the agency, make sure they're really nice to show to clients and that they have finished all the vetting steps that you would send to clients to see if they're the right match for them. And then I also have a tab for clients. And tabs are just like different database tables within Airtable. So you have, some people like to keep everybody in one table, but sometimes it's nice to be able to break out those two kind of pieces of your business into different tables. So as you are implementing any software, especially Airtable, it's really important to step back and think about the design of your base and not just trying to get your information in as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So we have like the caregiver applicants tab, and then we have a clients tab. And then the relational piece between the two of them is these positions. So as clients come to you and say, I have a position that needs to be filled, your clients might come to you over and over again. So trying to keep those positions within the clients tab doesn't always make sense, because you might have in the domestic staffing example, if a client has a new child, they're going to need a newborn care specialist. They might need a regular nanny. They might need a backup nanny, and they might also need a housekeeper. Or if you're working with, ultra high net worth individuals, you might have to worry about drivers or chefs and things like that. So you have to make sure that one client might mean multiple placements. So you have this relation between the clients, the positions they're trying to fill, and then you also have people that are applying for the jobs. So the ones, the caregivers that are sending in their applications saying that they want to be placed with the agency, they'll send their applications in. Sometimes if you, thank you, Microsoft, is sometimes if you also place a job posting on like Indeed or some of the other job posting sites, people might apply for the job that way. So you want to keep track of people who are looking for specific jobs. So knowing who's applying for a position that's open is important, but also keeping track of who you sent to the client to see if they're happy, if they're interested in working with them, and then who is the ultimate placement for that client for that position. So you want to keep track of those different components of the placement, not just the client, not just the caregiver that's ultimately placed, but also the ones that you're sending, because you want to track why the client's not liking somebody. You keep sending a certain type of caregiver and they're like, oh, we don't like any attribute of these caregivers. It's important to understand why, so that you don't keep sending the same people over and over again. And then it's also nice to know who the final placement is, so you can check in with the client and then pull in that relational piece of like the CRM, where you follow up with the client at certain milestones, a week after they placed, a month after they placed, a year after they placed. So having that information as discrete pieces of data is really important.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of information. Questions on those kind of things?
Yeah, so let's talk about, so this comes just out of the box. None of these different tabs are programmed, right? So when you're starting out with an Airtable, it's clean, there's nothing in it. So when you were designing this for one of your clients, or this was a demo, when you were creating this demo, you would start by saying, okay, I want to have a position sort of database, and you would decide what are the different fields that I want within that position database. Obviously, I want to know what client it's attached to, and probably be attached to just one client. I want to have a name for that position, so you create a name field for that, and then you'd want to have something about the applicants to that position, and that could be multiple applicants, and each one of those ties to the caregiver database. So you are sort of deciding each one of these fields, and I imagine each one of these fields, there's probably different types, like a text field, or a date field, or a time field, or a dollar field, or like a pick list kind of field.
Yeah, definitely. So there's the different fields in Airtable. You can have a single select, you can have a short answer field, a long answer field. They also allow for rich text. So if you want bolds and checklists and things like that in a big box in one field, you can do that. There's checkboxes. You can track which collaborator owns the record, and also which collaborator last touched the record, which is really good when you have a lot of people working in the same database. You can see who last touched what. And it's important to use to your point of currency, because if you have a currency table tab in here, fields, you can actually see some of the same things that you would see in Excel. So like if you wanted to put, you could have sums and averages and some of that formulaic pieces too, right? So you wanted to keep track of the value of each client. You could see at this very bottom corner, you can see the sums, and you can also see it up here. So any of the groupings at the top, where a grouping is basically saying, I want to take a status or some other attribute of a job, for example, and group those together. So I can start to see trends. So like if we were grouping on placement type, we could see the value of each placement type.
Yeah.
Or the status, like if it's like who's already been placed, who's already been invoiced, I can see what my accounts receivable could be, because if I have 5 placements in the last month, I know I'm expecting $50,000.
Yeah. So I can see that it looks like there's some ability to do some calculations or some functions using Airtable. But if you're trying to probably do heavy duty analytics, you might be better sticking off with Excel. Talk to me a little bit about, when might Excel be a better tool? Because Excel can do some lookups and you can do some VLOOKUPs and stuff, but but Excel is not really great relational database. So what would be a good application for Airtable, and what would be a better one for like Excel?
So that's a great question. So for formulas, you can do a lot of the same kind of calculations you do in Excel, but it's row based. Each record is a row in Excel. So if you wanted to sum up a bunch of tables, you could using like the little sum function up here, and you can do some of that. But if you're trying to like, I always say like for accounting, it's a great accrual calculator because you can accrue across one entry, but it's not a good place to try to build a balance sheet or an income statement because you don't have that columnar calculation that you really need in order to build out full accounting processes.
I see.
So it's discrete data. It's nice because you can do a lot and just understand one piece. There are also some charts like you would have in Excel. You can do a pivot table, but it's on the sidebar. So if you're trying to like build, like I build really complex Excel spreadsheets, and so there are things that if you're trying to take multiple records or multiple pieces of information and try to, do data processing or machine learning or things like that, Airtable is not the place for that. It's more for each discrete piece of information. You can see groupings, you can see some basics, but you're not going to do this whole base calculation at the same level that you would in Excel.
All right. Maybe you can show us a little bit more of the functionality here. Like you just created a sum row for us. Maybe show us how you could come up with like another relationship here. I don't know what is missing from this, but if we were just kind of give us an example of how you would add an extra like field to this.
So for this example, like wanted to keep using, for example, if you're trying to do interviews between a client and caregivers.
Yeah.
Calendly is not the place to do that because it's only one resource, it's only one person.
Mm.
So there's like this problem of trying to figure out what the client's availability is and what the caregiver's availability is, or when you're gonna what times you're gonna offer them. So you can keep track of the times that a specific client is available and then offer them to the applicants. So you can keep track of what interviews are actually booked and then the availability of the client. So you can just say, hey, caregiver, here's 3 times that the client's available, pick one, and then there's 2 left and so forth. So there are some relational pieces there where you can kind of keep track of all those interviews that are happening without using an extra tool.
I see. And you have one tab on here is email templates. Tell
Yeah.
me about that.
I'm working on a functionality, but it doesn't really matter anymore because there's automations in Airtable. So a lot of times as an agency, as you get more standard operating procedures or in a business in general, you might have these canned emails, which are email templates that you just mail merge the client or somebody else's name into it. And it's the same information. You might push in like dates or specifics, but for the most part, it's a templated boilerplate email. So a lot of places, a lot of businesses in general in their client relationship management like to have the same emails go out consistently. That way you can tell the clients the same thing. You don't have to remember what you told somebody. And then also as you build up more team members, the communication is consistent across the board. So there was a time when I was trying to use buttons to do this, but now they have automations directly in Airtable, which means that if you change like a status or some other condition within a record, you can actually send an email from Office 365 or Gmail out of your actual email clients, and it mail merges the information into the email.
Okay.
So it's cool because I like to use Airtable as like the engine of your business. And if you use it as a dashboard, if you change statuses, you don't have to go in your email and send an email. If you just send that email that you've already planned out, that you've already structured based on the change in the status of the client, for example. So it keeps that communication going without somebody having context switch and go into another platform.
All right.
So, having those canned emails, I know that some clients I have like to have just email templates in here anyway for things that don't follow the SOPs, but like refund requests, or we don't have that yet, or I'm sorry, we're booked, or we have a wait list. Some of those more like need to be personalized emails, I might keep them in here as well.
All right. Talk
And
to me
then
about some of the different use cases that you've seen for Airtable. Maybe one, so I know that you work with businesses to help them set up their Airtable and design it and program it. What are some of the different use cases that you've seen?
so in construction, I've seen where we keep track of new inquiries coming in. The once they've been the drawings have been made, once the proposal's been sent out, and then tracking and sending information to the contractors or the subcontractors so that they can go out and actually build the thing that they're building. Keeping track of what we're working on inventory pieces there as well to kind of see what the inventory is and what needs to be ordered based on the jobs that are upcoming. I've used it for digital marketing, a lot of tracking time spent on projects against budgets. So understanding what the budget's left and when it's time to say, hey, you've already used your retainer, give us more money. Especially when you have multiple team members working on things and there's different price points and doing some of those basic calculations. It's a really nice tool as well. Um, we use it a lot for project management for large teams, making sure everybody knows, like once you say a new project on the horizon, like setting up all the deliverables, setting up all the times and updating calendars and things like that. So there's a lot of different places. I'm trying to think. I built a really cool accrual calculator for somebody. So there's a whole like world of things that we're working on, not just in placement agencies. It's just an interesting, problem to solve. But there's just so many problems to solve, and a lot of it is just trying to figure out like how to take this data that you have in your business that you're touching every day and do something with it, action on it, and kind of make it so that your team's not spending time on the rote basics of providing service. It's really about taking it to the next level.
Okay. Um, what does it take to kind of learn Airtable? So, to what degree, if you're a business, would you need to get someone like you, like on an ongoing basis? Or if someone really put their head to it and studied all weekend long, is it possible to learn enough to set it up kind of yourself? Or, or can you sort of learn enough to maintain a system going on? Like what's the level, would you say, of how much education and programming skill is required to set it up and then design it and maintain it?
So I think it really depends on your technology level. Like some clients I work with just want the box to dance. Like they just want to start using it. They have zero and like they don't want to move outside of the structure. So that's where you would have somebody like a full developer come in and completely implement it. I will say that I'm starting to see more trends of businesses that gotten to a certain point in Airtable and are now like, I've gotten past the no code, low code point. I now need scripting because now we're doing crazy stuff with Airtable. If you sat down and just watched a bunch of YouTube videos and Airtable videos, there's plenty of training out there to get started and be really dangerous with the system and do some really cool things. And that's not even getting into the automations and apps. It's really, I always say this, the most important thing as a business, if you're trying to adopt any technology, is know what you do on paper first before you try to build it. Because if you try to like go into this box and be like, the box is going to tell me what to do, it's not. So if you know what your processes are, what you do by hand, and then say, okay, how do I translate this to technology? It's a much easier hill to climb.
Mhm.
Then the next piece is the technology adoption.
Okay. Um, and what's the cost of Airtable?
So I always say to use the pro version that has the automations and the apps and all the fun stuff. That is $26 per person, I think, if you pay monthly, and it's $20 a month if you pay yearly. There is an enterprise option that allows you to kind of have an admin base and have a little bit more control over who's in and out. And for larger teams, it's really more cost efficient, but I don't know what those prices are. They
Okay.
don't say that off the top.
All right.
But also too, I think Airtable is doing a really good job in general of making you like not have to use a Zapier or an Integromat automation tool because they have automations And then they just announced interfaces. I just started building interfaces, which is nice. It's like a little portal for your team to use so that you're not overwhelmed with that grid.
Okay. What is the typical size of businesses that tend to use Airtable? In the example that you gave, for example, like the nanny staffing tool, I could imagine that like a large enough nanny staffing agency might go with off the shelf kind of recruiting firm software, staffing firm software. So is there kind of a range of sizes of firms that, you know, you know, maybe it's like 1 million to 10 million, or 100,000 to 1 million, or where that's kind of a sweet spot. And if you're much bigger than that, there's some other enterprise type solutions. Um,
Yeah, I think that the 2 million before you get into the enterprise, I think that before that you get into the enterprise, ERP solutions, the enterprise software. I can't remember what it's called. But what I find too is that businesses that could be higher and go into a more enterprise solution find that the enterprise solutions don't account for all the nuances of their business. So sometimes they're doing things that are not within the box.
mhm.
So they end up using other software to handle it situations like Google Sheets for something for keeping track of certain things, or they start to find that they're like trying to paste things together around. I worked in an accounting firm and we used Yardi a lot. It was actually real estate firm, and I was an accountant. We used Yardi. The IT department had to build in an accounts payable platform just for us to enter the accounts payable, which was silly because they were paying so much for Yardi. So it's like ERPs just don't always answer every question. And I think as businesses change and just like the structure of businesses change, you are going to find more disruption in that ERP platforms just because they didn't anticipate the way that businesses run now when they built.
Okay. So this would be and is there a is there sort of a size limitations on it where Airtable starts to break down and just can't really handle the load, is like in terms of number of records or number of users or volume
The
of
re-
transactions or something?
so it's more the records. So it's 50,000 records per base. So this is not a big data processing. So you might start to partition your data and have like each business sector might have their own base, and then you might have like a machine that you use to like do queries and things like that, which is what an ERP does, right? They partition their data in different places. So you will get that 50,000 record, but if you're just trying to like machine learn on all of the customer transactions over the last 4 years and figure out trends, put it in an Excel spreadsheet and load it into R and run the model. The modeling software is for the modeling, the day-to-day processing and understanding of information, or actually like actioning on the data while it's still in play. Usually that's usually enough within the 50,000 records. It's when you're trying to just keep data for the sake of data that you'll start running into those problems.
All right. If someone, a listener, wants to learn Airtable, what would you say is the best way to learn and get started?
I think just getting into it. Airtable has Universe, which they're not as updated as before, but like there's a lot of just basic bases that are already built that you can build off of. Usually it's like, okay, this one's kind of close enough to start with, and then I can just reverse engineer. Or, I like drawing out software, like where you draw out a picture of what you want and how the information flows, and then just start going in there. I think getting in there and actually like trying to solve a problem with Airtable is the best way to get started. And usually it's like once you get to a point, you're like, how do I do this? You can just usually Google it, which is sad. But you can Google anything if you know what question to ask. Airtable forum is great. It's community.airtable.com. And then I am now starting up a group, which is Airtips, which is just people who like Airtable and learning more things, and just keeping updated on all the cool things, because the releases are just getting crazy. Like Interfaces was a huge release and it's really awesome. And there's just so much going on with Airtable. And it's nice to be working with a software that actually wants to keep updating, because I always feel at some point in software, they stop building and they just start kind of sitting back and enjoying the fruits of their labor. So they're still in the building phase. So it's a really cool place to get started. We're at the beginning of what the explosion of Airtable will be.
Okay. All right. Um, And tell us a little bit about if someone wants to work with your firm, where should they go?
Growwithjen.com. It's one N. But that's where my website is, and you can learn a little bit more about me and the use cases. I have 2 team members, but mostly will be working with me. So it's really nice that some clients really like having that ability to like talk with the person actually building. It's not an agency, it's really a consultancy. So yeah, growwithjen.com.
Fantastic. And we'll include that link in the show notes. Jen, thank you for joining today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Will.